Hello and welcome to Government Week 14. Welcome back from the holidays. Hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and rung in the New Year right. And our lesson this week kind of wraps up a little bit. Basically, we got two more lessons here. In today's lesson, we're going to discuss, now that we have an idea what government is, how does it work in terms of modern day events? How does the government interact with our economy? How does the government interact with the big issues of the day, issues that dominate discussion? What is government's role in all this? Basically, how does the rubber meet the road? Now that we've established this really superb system of government, how does it work? How does it address things that are a daily question for us? This unit will discuss the issues that confront all of us as Americans, and things like the economy, government, immigration, education, some of the real hot button issues of the day, and take a look at how government treats it today as opposed to yesterday or last century or even from the beginning of this nation. We'll start with the economy, and of course the economy is basically the way people produce, distribute, and use goods and services. Every sector of our being, town, county, state, city, national government, international, has an economy of some sort. There is a world economy which we participate in. Many, many factors affect an economy. New invention can cause new wealth to be created. They can make a geographic area grow in size. Bad weather affects the economy in many sectors. The economy is not simple. There's an old joke that says if you want to hear 10 different opinions about how the economy is doing, ask 10 economists how the economy is doing. You'll get 10 different opinions. It is a very, very complicated thing. There are people, lots of people, who spend their entire lives trying to predict what the economy is going to do. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong, but that should underscore just how difficult this thing, as simple as an economy seems, it's the transfer of goods and services. It is very, very complex, particularly when you get to national and international levels. Now, the classic relationship that the government has with the economy sort of goes on a continuum, if you can imagine it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to have any slides this week. I'm doing this kind of in haste because I want to get this up to you very quickly. We have some appointments this weekend. I wanted to get this up on the website as quickly as I could. I'll have some slides to show you Monday that will help in the process of explaining this, hopefully. Basically, government interacts with the economy more or less on a continuum. This being the least government involvement in an economy, this being the most government involvement in an economy. Over here, you have what's called a free market command or a free market system. We call it capitalism. It is basically the idea that government interferes as little as possible with the economy, that people, businesses, other entities are the ones that control the day-to-day machinations. Over here is a command economy. Socialism, collectivism, in extreme examples, communism. This is where the government is so involved in the economy that the two are almost inseparable. The government directs pretty much every aspect of the economy over here, very little, if any, over here. Now, businesses offer goods and services in what we call over here a free market. Supply and demand are what determines the prices that businesses charge for items and services. The desire for profit. You remember the old saying in the movie, greed is good? Well, it was meant in an ironic sense, but in the very real sense, not greed, but the desire for profit, the desire to make a buck or two so you can feed your family. That is what fuels the economy. I'm going to show you on Monday some slides from my favorite economist, Adam Smith, that will underscore this philosophy quite a bit. It is under this capitalistic economy that businesses have to compete. They have to offer you better services, better products at a price you can afford. If the other guy is offering a better product or service, they have to up their game or they're going out of business. If the other guy is offering the same products and services but at a slightly cheaper price, they got to knock down a little bit. Where there is great competition, there are going to be the lowest possible prices. Probably the best example we can give locally is gasoline. How many gasoline stations do we have around here? How big of a difference in the prices do you see? It's usually only a penny or two, right? That's because there's lots of competition. Like Murphy's, if they go 5 cents lower for whatever reason, people will flock to them because, again, it's the same product, but it's 5 cents a gallon cheaper. That puts pressure on the other stations. Boy, we have to lower our prices as far as possible while still turning a profit in order to get people over here. So because you have that vast, just intense competition, gas prices, those profit margins are going to be very, very slim. But there will always be gas stations because, why? There's a great demand for gasoline. In a pure free market, the government over here stands completely aside and lets market forces, businesses, people do every single thing. That's one extreme. The other extreme, the command economy, socialism, where the government not only directs the economy, but in many cases they own the economy. They own what's called the means of production. The businesses, the land on which crops are grown. Everything else is a part of government. It is regulated by government. In this economy right here, the government commands what and how much workers will produce. Over here, you don't produce any more than there's a demand for in a perfect scenario. You don't want to produce 10 million widgets when you only think you're going to sell 1 million of them. You'll have 9 million widgets clogging up the warehouse that you can't sell. Over here, the government, central planners, bureaucrats, who don't pay any price for being incorrect, are the ones who decide how much is produced. It does not respond to the desires of we the people. It responds to the desires of whatever the government says should be. It's no surprise that over here, that cannot be successful. That cannot be run as efficiently as over here. It cannot be. Why? Over here, if you're wrong, you lose money. You lose your livelihood. If you're wrong over here, who cares? You're still in the government. Doesn't matter. Your job is insured. Where there is no motive for improvement, there is no improvement. A lot of the people who object to capitalism as a system are in reality rejecting human nature. Capitalism, flaws and all, and there are flaws, it is the only economic system that harnesses the power of human nature. It is our nature to produce. It is our nature to own. Ownership is part of 4 of the 10 commandments. It is in our nature to own and produce. Capitalism takes advantage of that, it harnesses that, and it rewards that. Socialism pretends it can change human nature, or that human nature doesn't even exist. That's a fantasy. And that's why socialism struggles to work. That's why it has to be quite often enforced at the point of a gun. Now, we talked about this being a spectrum. That means it goes, you have all kinds of things in between. And yes, most everything's in between. There is no such thing as a completely free market. There is no such thing, thank God, as a completely communistic economy. Most everyone is in the middle somewhere. Even the best, even the freest of free market economies, history has taught us, will require some degree of government regulation. Government laws and policies have helped reduce smog caused by industries. Ordinarily, an industry would have very little incentive to spend the money to fix the fog, even though they're living in the fog, or the smog, I guess would be better to say. Ordinarily, they would have very little incentive to do that. But of course, collectively, we're saying that's wrong. So yes, we do at that point require collective action to tell industry A, you can't put that into the water. You can't put that into the air. We need government, so we've discovered, to enforce workforce safety laws. Makes sense. Without government involvement, workforce safety was practically non-existent. Late 19th century, my goodness. You took your life into your hands in some occupations. Also, again, child labor. Child labor was terrible in the late 19th century, but government regulations have made sure that children don't have to go to work in a factory. It's a good thing. As long as it doesn't get too onerous, it's a good thing. And again, we will be forever debating at what point government regulations become a market killer. We'll always be debating that threshold. And again, what's the word? Thank God we can debate it. The day we can't debate it, we're not free. Without regulation, again, companies do not have an incentive to do some collective good. False claims in advertising are another thing that our government polices that we have decided collectively, yes, they have a role in that. That's sort of over here on the spectrum. As you get a little bit closer over here, you start seeing government taking a more active role in the economy, subsidizing some industries, even taking over some of them that are deemed in the national interest. The U.S. toys with this a little bit. Amtrak is a perfect example of a private service that's being publicly funded. To a lesser degree, the post office is sort of an example of that. The post office, again, we've discussed that in previous lessons. In terms of defining it where it goes on a government spectrum, it's kind of a weird entity all on its own. When you get over to Europe, you see a lot more Amtraks. You see the government taking an active and direct role in more sectors of the economy. In the United Kingdom, for example, the government owns all the mining industry. They own the entire country's healthcare system. It's not just, a single-payer system. Every piece of healthcare in the UK originates with the government, paid for by the government. In this complete command economy, as you get closer to it, the government runs all businesses and all endeavors. The value of private ownership, though, in some cases is being recognized. China is the most conspicuous example of this, of ostensibly a communist economy, but they are learning there are advantages to having some private ownership. I would say there's advantage to having lots of private ownership, but even communist China recognizes there is value in having private ownership because, again, what's the thing? Those private companies, because they have skin in the game, because their livelihoods are on the line, they are going to be dynamic. They're going to improve. They're going to innovate. Another thing that happens over here with the command economy, you create what's called the black market. I have met several people from the former Soviet bloc nations who tell me that the black market was so much a part of their lives, probably even more than the government market. Being able to know this guy, he can get you cigarettes over here. That guy, he can find you some whiskey. This guy can get you some Bob Dylan records or whatever. All illegal, but sometimes even then, much like the mafia. You've seen all the gangster movies where they steal cigarettes and sell them at a discount. Black markets operate like that. And command economies beg for the creation of black markets. If I wanted to create a black market and I was king of the U.S., I would make us a 100% communist nation. That would make black markets thrive. Again, in the battle between law and appetite, where should your money be bet on? Appetite. Every single time, appetite will win. History demonstrates that. Again, in the United States, we have, for the most part, a free market economy, but we do, of course, have essential government regulations on industries. And we even tip over here to where some industries are subsidized because they're considered national good. We kind of tinker over that, but for the most part, we're over here. Again, communist China, even though they're communists, they're starting to see a little bit of value in that. maybe they'll move over here and join us one day and compete fairly in the world economy. And of course, there is, when you're talking about an entity as large and pervasive as the United States government, there is any number of impacts they can have on an economy. Regulations, of course, taxes. And again, we'll forever debate the level of taxation that is necessary and at what point it becomes onerous. At what point does it cost a business more to pay taxes than before they can make a profit? Again, and the government services that help those businesses, roads, water, sewer, etc. The government does not produce wealth. The government's job is primarily to redistribute wealth. And again, we as a society have decided that some of that is okay. Again, welfare payments and those unemployment assistance. Again, we have decided that a certain amount of that is okay. Again, we're debating the scope of that, and we always will. The biblical example we have, of course, is that Christians should give their wealth voluntarily. Keyword, voluntarily. If you are taxed at a high level, what choice do you have? Pay it or go to jail. That's not voluntary. Also, as we've mentioned in these classes before, as a Christian, part of giving is the benefit we receive, spiritual benefit. We get closer to God when we give of our own free will. We see more clearly God's face when we give of our own free will. We get no spiritual benefit from doing that through taxation. None. Government plays an important role in a capitalist economy by, hopefully, at its best iteration, defending truth and justice. We see lots of that, some of those traits in the Bible as well, where government is more than just the distribution of resources. It is the source of truth and judgment. Now let's get into some of the hot button issues today where direct government involvement could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I'm going to try not to politicize these too much because I want us to discuss this in class, and I want to get your take on what you think the government should do in some of these situations. Immigration, of course, is a crucial issue. We are a nation of immigrants. We have any number of people throughout history who have come here to escape persecution, to have a new life, to be able to act upon their life's calling in some cases. Of course, the issue that we modern day associate with immigration far too much is illegal immigration. There is a legal way to immigrate to the United States. Traditionally, the U.S. has an annual limit on the number of immigrants it will accept from other nations. And you can see where that would be a good idea. To instantly open up the doors and allow our nation of 330 million people to swell to 400 million people overnight would be way too taxing on our resources, and those who are already here would have to bear the brunt of the cost. So we manage the intake of people, just like we manage the intake of any resource, really. Official U.S. immigration policy puts a cap. Also, it takes the visas that they award and puts them into different categories. The most common is the tourist visa for people who are just visiting on vacation. The next most common is the student visa for those who are coming here specifically to study at a college or a university. The next biggest one is the work visa, where seasonal workers, migrant workers, come here to work during a specified season and then return home. And again, the process is if you want to become a citizen of the U.S., you apply for a permanent resident card, green card it's called. Usually 10 years, I think, for a green card, and then you can apply to become a U.S. citizen. It is an onerous process. I like that. Not because I like people to go through the quagmire of government. Lord knows I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But if you go through that process, you want it. You want it bad. And you're willing to do a lot to get it. The people who are sworn in as naturalized U.S. citizens are almost always the most patriotic among us. They know why America is good. We who were born here, who take for granted this wonderful Constitution and Bill of Rights, it does not mean nearly as much to us as it would to someone who came from a country that had none of those protections of individual liberty. They regard it sacred because they know what the alternative is. And they have busted their butts for years to work towards this status, becoming a U.S. citizen. You give me 1,000 naturalized immigrants any day over 1 million citizens who have born and raised here and take our freedoms for granted. I'll take the immigrants any day of the week. But again, we're talking about illegal immigration, and because it can't be quantified, because it can't be really controlled in that respect, it makes for a taxing, figuratively and literally, situation for government. It's impossible to know how many undocumented immigrants are here. Of course, when they come here illegally, you can't know their background. They may be a criminal. They could be a terrorist. You have no idea. And of course, for border communities that have this extra unneeded population there are economic and social pressures there. Collectively, illegal immigration costs resources and whatnot. Again, you can see where having a reasonable cap on immigration is not just a good, but really a necessary idea. Now, another avenue to this debate recently has been the differentiation between immigrant and refugee. Immigrants coming here out of their own accord, student visa, work visa, maybe an eye towards becoming a citizen of the U.S. because they love the country. Refugees are different. Refugees are escaping persecution in their home country. They have been kicked out of their home country in some cases. They're seeking political asylum. And U.S. policy traditionally has been to let people in if they are refugees. It's a very humanitarian way to look at it, because no one wants anyone else to suffer, no one that's a good person. So traditionally, United States policies towards refugees, not immigrants, has been to more or less let them in after a very brief vetting process. Well, what's happening, unfortunately, is a lot of the people who are really immigrants are not escaping persecution. They're going to the border and they're claiming to be a refugee. Well, if you're an immigrant, we have to put you through all this rigmarole, and in most cases, if you're not here legally, you get booted out. If you claim refugee status, though, that's different. And the word's gotten around to those who are coming here, mainly through our southern border, that if you want to skip all the process, you just claim to be a refugee. So you can understand the pressure that that's putting on U.S. refugee policy. What was a very well-intended policy of generally accepting refugees from most any nation under any pretense is now being abused. What do you think should be done? How should we handle this? Oh, here's another simple issue: healthcare. Healthcare has become 1/6 of the gross national product, probably now closer to 1/5, close to 20%. And it has been the thrust of debates for years. Again, remember that continuum, capitalist, communist. How much should the government intrude on the economy? Healthcare is an industry. $2 trillion were spent last year on healthcare. Costs, doctors, equipment, you name it. It's a $1 trillion industry. How much does government want to get involved in that? Well, here's the thing. Government is already very involved in that. The cost of healthcare has gone up pretty much on par with the level of government involvement in healthcare. Not a surprise. If you want to make something more expensive, get the government involved. Why is college tuition so expensive? Because government underwrites lots of tuition. Because government underwrites a lot of it, they can jack up the tuition. Man, government's going to take care of it. That's what's happened in healthcare. The cost in so many cases has gone up simply because government's paying for it. What do we care? Government has no incentive to cap their spending other than whatever their bank account says. Of course, healthcare used to be you going to your doctor and them looking you over and y'all deciding what to do, and you pay the doctor whatever they charge you. Private health insurance began cropping up really before World War II, and people very quickly learned that if they pooled their resources, say with an employer, they could get very good rates on health insurance. And so it really, in about the span of a generation, private health insurance provided by the employer became pretty much the norm and not the exception in the United States. And of course, a generation after that, Medicare and Medicaid were adopted by Congress in 1965. Medicare is a health insurance program that covers the needs of elderly persons. Medicaid is health insurance for low-income Americans and others who cannot afford traditional health coverage. And of course, this is very, 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 very expensive. It comes out of your payroll tax, all of this good stuff. And because of that involvement, there's always a push to get a little more involved, particularly when we're talking about the commodity here. This isn't a widget. This is healthcare. This is life or death. So people will look at that and claim that it's a human right. They will go back to those wonderful words in the preamble that say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, construe this as life, and say that it is government's duty to provide health care. Here's the problem. Nothing can be a right if it has to be provided to you. Because if it can be provided to you, it can be taken away. And anything that can be taken away is not a right. Now, you can say the government can take away your free speech. No, they can't. They can fail to secure your free speech. You still have the innate right to free speech, regardless of whether the government is securing it or not. Healthcare is different. Healthcare is a commodity. Healthcare has to be provided for you. It has to be administered to you. Someone has to do it. And if you are claiming it as a right, as a human right, then you are also claiming the right to conscript people to provide this service for whatever pay or non-pay that you deem they need. It's a whole lot of problems when you take a commodity and place it under the umbrella of being a human right. That brings it to a whole different level. And we need to oppose that, because that is a slippery slope I do not want to start. Anyway, government involvement, of course, early 1990s, under the Clinton administration, was a push to nationalize healthcare. That died in Congress. Of course, 2010, second year of Obama's presidency, they passed the Affordable Care Act, which was not a complete government takeover of healthcare, but it was certainly a step in that direction. We are now, of course, in the process very much of tweaking ACA, and as a result, the end result is very few people right now pay their doctors directly. That just doesn't happen. It's either the government paying your doctor bill or your insurer paying your doctor's bill. The insurance and the government are usually the third party in most of these transactions. Because we have third parties involved, the cost is going to go up. That's true of any commodity. The middleman, the one who is passing through the widget that you're purchasing. Anytime there's a third, fourth, fifth, sixth party involved, the price of the commodity is going to go up. That is why healthcare is so expensive. And of course, as our population grays, that is, the average age gets on up there, as we make new medical discoveries that help us to live a little bit longer, we were going to have lots of debates over healthcare, particularly end-of-life issues, because, again, we are living longer now. I mean, we might have had a couple of years there where the life expectancy ticked back just a little bit, but still generally much longer than a generation ago. Interesting questions come about if the government is controlling healthcare. If the government is controlling healthcare, then they can, as a cost cutting measure, plausibly say it is in the national interest if people stay in shape. If government is paying for your health care, then they could feasibly say that you need to be in shape. And taking it to the nth degree, they could mandate that you eat only healthy foods, that you get a government approved amount of exercise per day, that you're able to pass a government physical fitness test periodically to determine if you're eligible to stay on the government healthcare system. There's lots of potential problems with direct government involvement in something that is as intensely personal as healthcare. There are a few more issues that are more personal to someone. And to give the government a large amount of authority in it is begging for problems. A couple of words on other things as government interacts with big things. Education. Again, we've mentioned before that because the 10th Amendment, because the Constitution does not mention education, it has been an issue that has been preserved or remanded to the states. And states traditionally have taken the leading role in education. Of course, up until maybe the mid-1800s, the idea of school was a community getting together, pooling some money voluntarily, building a schoolhouse, paying for a school marm or a schoolmaster to run things. All the kids in that town, village, whatever, attended the school until they were old enough to work on their own out in the field. That was education. For rich people, it was send your kid off to a large private academy somewhere, and they were schooled, and in some cases went to college. When government began getting involved in education, the expectations were, and they were carried out, that more people, kids, would be involved in education. And as government became involved, there were compulsory attendance laws, state funding of education. If you are having tax dollars taken out of your pocketbook for your kid to go to school, you're going to make sure they go to school because you're paying for it. Formal schooling has taken on more of a person's life, particularly since World War II. And of course, one of the issues there is the rights and roles of parents. One rule of thumb that is held up pretty well: the more government is involved in education, the less authority parents have. For most of human history, the rearing of a child, including their education, formal and informal, was seen as the duty of parents. Grandparents in some cases, the family unit certainly. Now it is increasingly seen as the role of the government. And for those parents who want to have a more active role, it's a little more frustrating. You guys are part of the response to that, homeschooling. Your parents have decided, yeah, even though the state's still going to take our money, our children's education is too important to be left to this bureaucratic quagmire we call the public school system. And here we are. You've got a teacher looking at you, not in a suit and tie, but in a Pink Floyd shirt. That's the way we homeschool. I'll put you guys up against public school students any day of the week, though, trust me. The government, the more it gets involved in education, the less authority parents have. The implications are very, very many. There are societal implications from this. In some cases, public schools are seen as indoctrination centers. If you believe our government is strongly left of center politically, what better way to have that meet the road than to impart that kind of wisdom in a public school setting under the guise of education? Now, certainly in totality, public education has, I think, in any measure, done more good than harm. Billions of people have been educated. Our lives are better for having smarter people, I think, in our midst. But again, Every time government gets more involved in something, you're going to lose a little something in the process. We have to continue to make sure that government knows their proper role. And again, what we're doing here, this homeschooling movement, is one of the responses to that. Now, your book mentions abortion in Lesson 70. I'm just going to bring it up here in the context of we will be discussing that on Monday. And we'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend.